And welcome Trustee Svidich. So we're ready to proceed. We are on 3.0, our board priorities. So that is our focus and always on our agenda to be aware of. Item number 4 are action items. So this is policy work that's been done since our last board meeting. So I will hand it over to Trustee Svidich to lead us through these items.
So I'm just trying to bring up the agenda items here. There we go. Yes, so we had met and gone over our first set of policies. We were all assigned 3 apiece, and we're just going to go through. I just read through them right through the action items, and we so we went through 4.1, the role of the board, and we would ask that the board give policy 2 the first reading as presented. Any questions on that one? I guess I should ask that first, right?
Just a bit of rationale on the changes. That's all that we're looking for.
Okay, so we had removed, so if you have a look at that policy, we had removed under specific areas of responsibility 1.3 to opt out of the ASFF. And I think there was one other, sorry, and then superintendent board relations, 7.6. We removed the superintendent succession planning because that's not something that we actually are tasked with. Section 8, policy development, 8.3. We don't, the Robert Rules of Order, we don't use the Robert Rules of Order, so we had removed that. And then under policy 310, where are we at here? Incumbent trustees are encouraged to help newly elected trustees become informed about the history, functions, policies, procedures, and issues. And then we added the board will assign new trustees a mentor. So just to give the new trustees some help with their new duties as assigned. And then the appendix G, we had added, there was some discussion about honorarium and per diems. So we added the, under the honorarium, you can see we had committee of the whole.
Right, so sorry, I'll just stop you there. Trustee Svidich, we're just gonna start with 4.1.
Okay.
So we're looking for a motion to approve that first reading. So just a clarification on the changes that were made. So some of them came out from that first item there. Yeah, so that's no longer applicable, 1.3. So that's the rationale for that. And then the second item that came out from our board self-evaluation, to remove that. And then 8.3, just clarifying that. I just want to make sure that everybody understands what that means. So we don't actually, Robert's rules does not provide rules for approving policies. Is that correct? That's why. I mean, we follow Robert's Rules of Order for our board meeting.
Correct.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
Yeah, so that 8.3 isn't really applicable. Okay.
Right. Right.
Okay. So just
Madam Chair, just to add on, 1 second, the 1.3 raising with the new Education Act, it's no longer relevant. So then,
Right.
for our work. Okay, thank you.
Right. Okay, so Dan, are you making that motion on 4.1?
Mhm.
Okay, so trustee Svidich moves that the board give policy 2 roll the board first reading as presented. Okay, any comments or questions? Okay, I'll call the question though. All those in favor? Trustees? Okay, so that's carried unanimously. Okay, 4.2, role of the trustee. And again, I'll just pass it over to you, Dan.
Yep. I'm just waiting for it to load here. Oh, come on. Okay, so role of the trustee. So we had added, as you can see under number 4 there, we had added that we would assign new trustees a mentor just to help them with their new duties, their new roles. And then the appendix G, we had added, there was discussion with the honorarium per diem. We added committee of the whole under honorariums.
Okay, so sorry, I'll just stop you there again, trustee Svidich. So we're going to stay with 4.2 policy 3. So there's just one item to.
Oh, yeah, 1 item
at a
per,
time.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Right.
per
We
motion.
have to
Yeah.
do each one. I'm sorry.
Okay, so the only, again, just the rationale for that change that came out of our board self-evaluation. Is that correct?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. Okay, are there any comments or questions on this policy change?
I just as a comment, I think it's a really good change and I think it's really
Mhm.
needed. Happy with it. So I'm in favor.
Yeah, thank you.
Madam Chair. And again, as an organization, is that when you recognize that you have incumbency or incumbents within a cycle and you have newcomers, it's good practice to pair people around or to ask for that support. And in that regard, that will enhance and support newly elected trustees when they come on board to be able to do the work and to understand the work that we do as well. So this is a very good change. Thank you.
Yes, I appreciate that. Okay, so trustee Svidich, are you making the motion for that
That's correct. Yep.
policy?
First reading is presented. Yes.
Okay, so trustee Svidich moves that the board give policy 3 role of the trustee first reading as presented. And I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and that's carried unanimously.
Okay.
Okay,
Next one.
4.3.
4.3. So we went over the honorariums and per diems and made 2 changes there. So we added the committee of the whole to honorarium. And then per diems, we removed committee of the whole from that section. So is there any discussion on that?
Okay, any
I-
discussion or
yeah.
comments? Trustee
I
Tuckwood?
I just have a comment that when this was done, it was filled out by all the trustees and everybody put down that they were in favor of keeping the committee of the whole as on the per diem. I don't see the need for that to change. When I look back over the number of meetings, there was very few. And I mean, this year there's been what, 2? So it's not a lot. And I just wonder just what was the reasoning?
So trustee Svidich, are you able to provide a response for trustee Tugwood?
That's a very valid point, Trustee Tugwood. And we did have numerous discussions about it, but there were other trustees that felt that we needed to revisit this again So that's why it was brought to our attention and why we readdressed it. So
Can you tell me what the reasoning is as to why it needed readjusting? Not just that people wanted it. What was the reasoning?
again,
Trustee Eflon, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I have a comment in support of this reverse. This was an oversight on our behalf when we were really looking at the committee of the whole meetings have always been with the board meetings. So 5 years ago, when we really looked at how we were doing business and to be transparent, that's when we moved the committee of the whole out of the equation and then started having just one board meeting. The purpose of the committee of the whole is to have boards or organizations to have a prior discussions sometimes before their meetings. What we were doing at the time, we realized we were having a lot of debates in the committee of the whole prior to coming back into our regular meetings. And that is why we moved that out of it and was having one single meeting. However, that option have always remained that it shouldn't be a per diem. We will never ever charge per diem for that. So you're right, Trustee Tagwood, when we did look at our honorariums and per diem, it was an oversight that we moved it out of there. So we took our option and then put it into a per diem, which shouldn't have happened. And that is why we have to reverse that back. You're right again, we don't normally use much of the committee of the whole. However, with our current state and the situation that we are in, it is becoming relevant that we are going to be using, and that is why we needed to. Again, it's being that it's a fiduciary responsibility for us as well to be able to manage our financial affairs. And if we continue to leave this where it is, then we will be costing more to the board on our operational side. So that is just the little history of it. Thank you.
I realize I've only been a part of the board for 3 years, but when this was brought forward, I disagree with you. It was not an oversight. It was specifically mentioned, and the committee of the whole, I thought it was so that we could have, it's almost like an in-camera, in that we don't make motions and we can meet as a committee to discuss certain things. And when I went back over the last 3 years, it was very minimal. So I disagree.
Okay, Trustee Sirwa, you had a comment? You're muted.
Sorry. Yes, I did bring this exact same topic up during the policy meeting. And 7 trustees did, in fact, were in total agreement with this. So I did not agree with the rest of the committee on this. So I am not for it either.
Okay, thank you. So as I understood, committee of the whole is usually always prior to the board meeting to receive information for your board meeting. So that's how I've always understood it, and that's how it was practiced in the past. So if there's no other comments, and we want to, or no other discussion, we can go forward. And Dan, are you, or sorry, Trustee Spidich, are you ready to make the motion on 4.3?
Yes, so I just wanted to make the comment that that was in the past, that's what we, and even I think it was prior to me as well, we would have the committee of the whole prior to the board meetings, which we do not have anymore, which is why I think how we ended up where we're at now. But yeah, that's just a comment. To make this, I would just pass, like to pass the motion as it stands and see where we're at here.
Okay, so Trustee Spidich, just confirming you are making the motion as it.
Yes. Making the
that the
motion.
board give policy 7 appendix G honorarium per diem days first and final reading as presented, and that the revised appendix now be in effect for the division.
Correct.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, I'll call the question then. All those in favor?
Madam Chair.
Okay, so those opposed? Okay, so the motion is defeated. Okay, thank you, policy, for looking into that and giving it thought. Okay, 4.4, committees of the board.
Yes, so 4.4 we had gone over. So the audit committee is the big change, or I shouldn't say big changes. We just made some amendments to it. So we had removed that we needed a member of the business community who's not a trustee and a member of the adult learning community who's not a trustee, and changed it basically to 2 public members of the community who are not trustees. So that was just a bit of an adjustment with that. And as well, the term, we added the term in there for 2-year terms for up to 2 consecutive terms. So that was added to the audit committee, which had just been added recently, as everyone is aware. And I think that's all we had added there. Any discussion on the membership, the audit committee membership 8.3?
Okay, just confirming this now aligns with the Education Act.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
And I like having the 2-year term. I think that was a good idea.
okay. Any other comments or questions on the policy 8? I think it's worked out really well. We've had a good experience with our new audit committee. Okay, trustee Spidich, are you making the motion to?
Yep, give that policy 8 first reading as presented.
Okay, all those in favor? Okay, and that is carried unanimously. Okay, 4.5.
Okay, 4.5 off-campus education.
Yes, and this is Lori.
Yes. So Charlie asked me to research off-campus education. It came to our attention that the last time we have a record of the board making a motion to approve off-campus education was in 1995, 1996, and it has changed quite a bit since then. The off-campus education handbook essentially says that school authorities must pass a motion approving the involvement of students in off-campus education activities. So this is why this is being brought forward, because we do have off-campus education happening within our 3 high schools. So we need essentially to make a motion in this regard, which is on this backgrounder sheet.
Okay, and there was just a very old motion on the books, correct?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
and yes, that's correct. And we need just a more updated one.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any comments or questions? Is there somebody ready to make a motion? 4.5?
Madam Chair, I can make that motion.
Okay,
That the board approve the involvement of St. Thomas Aquinas students in off-campus education activities. The courses include Career Internship 10, Green Certificate Program, Knowledge and Employability Work Readiness Grades 8 and 9, Knowledge and Employability Work Readiness 10-4, Knowledge and Employability Work Practicum 20-4 and 30-4, Registered Apprenticeship Program, RAP, Work Experience 15, 25, 35, Work Study Program component of core and complementary courses.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Afon. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and that is carried unanimously. Thank you. 4.7. And I'll pass this over to Charlie.
All right, are trustees able to see the documents that I'm sharing?
Yes.
Okay, so there are two documents that we're looking at here today. So the first is the annual education results report. So again, this is a new process for us as a division. We have to approve at this meeting an annual education results report and an education plan. So we'll start with the annual education results report. So you heard trustees in presentations earlier today, as well as a little bit in our committee of the whole this week. The results in the various dimensions. What is interesting in this new results report is that it includes not only provincial required measurements and goals, but also you notice that we now have board priorities and goals in this document. What I will, sorry if there's a little lag there as things are loading. What I will mention is based on feedback, there wasn't much change to the plan aside from the one dimension, which was in the area of dimension 5. Let me just get that up. Sorry, it was in the domain 6. So again, in parental involvement, as per previous discussions, we've just changed out some of the visuals to better reflect that measure. Apart from that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions that the board may have. It is a requirement that we have these posted to our website once approved by the end of November and also submitted to Alberta Education. That then triggers a meeting with Alberta Education to review our documents at the administrative level. But I will say I'm happy to report that the results in this document are very positive. We've pretty much maintained or increased in all areas of reporting. Included in the report as well at the end is the overall report card. And as you can see, it's a very positive reporting again this year. Of note also is that there were no incidences of whistleblower to report. So that's also included in this report. There were no incidences in this past year. Are there any questions?
Mr. Bouchard.
Trustee Afon, go ahead. Yeah.
So Mr. Bouchard, as we like you stated, we've looked at these documents a couple of times now. One of the biggest changes that have come with it as well is our parental engagement and support. And I'm hoping we will put out various mediums as to how to engage our parents and receive much information to help us do the work. So I will encourage that based on some of those discussions, you and your communication team we will find the best medium or the platform to engage our parents on, which will be my only comment at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Efron. So again, I would just like to commend staff and the division for the good work and the positive reflection of our results, and how often we do very well above the provincial standards, I guess. And unfortunately, it is a different year that we don't have PATs to look at. But it is what it is for sure. And again, I appreciate the good work of all staff and in the division. So, and I will just make a comment as well. We are moving into a new model, to the new assurance model. And the parent engagement is very important, and there will be a good opportunity for sure, I think. I mean, now we've even seen how well, you know, just the audit committee experience, how that has, you know, given given the public an opportunity to see what happens at that level. So I know that I did attend a couple of the school council meetings, and they were looking at their results as well, and they were talking about engagement and what that looks like. So at the school council level, they're definitely, that conversation is going on. So just looking forward to expanding that engagement with parents and community, and whatever that looks like. So again, it's an excellent report. So thank you very much for all the work on that. And I know Caitlin put a lot into it too. Yeah, very good.
So Madam Chair, I guess I would then ask for an approval or a motion to approve this annual education results report as itemized and or worded in 4.6.
Is there somebody willing to make that motion?
I can make that
Trustee
motion.
Tugwood. Okay, Trustee Tugwood moves that the board approve the education plan as presented. Should there be a year in that motion?
Sorry, that we've got two approvals here. We're on the
sorry.
annual education results
Yeah.
report.
Right, sorry.
So I'll approve the annual education results report for, should I put 2020, 2019, 2020?
2020, yeah, that's
it's
the motion.
2019, 2020.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And that is carried unanimously. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
So next I would present to the board the education plan as outlined in 4.7. So this plan is for the years 2020 to 2023. So new in this process is the ability for boards to do a term plan rather than a rolling plan. And we are choosing to do a term plan. This education plan would normally be approved in May, and it will be again this May. But for us to get caught up and into the proper cycle, we have to approve it here in November as well. Of note in the education plan is that there are no measures. So that is different. You are used to in the past seeing an annual education plan and results report under one cover. So what's different now again is the education plan only lists the goals, the associated strategies, as well as the way that we will as a division measure those goals and our progress on strategies. So this quite a bit different in that respect this year. Again, this education plan now affords us the ability to put in our own board priorities and local goals. So they're all incorporated in here. So other than that, the education plan, I will just mention, does have links to the 2021 budget that was approved last spring. That is also in this document. So other than that, it's more of a guiding document that, provides direction on our work for this current school year. And then as Chair Lemaire just explained, now the work between the education plan and the annual education results report is to consult with stakeholders and tweak our strategies as we go forward. But these board priorities, local goals, as well as the provincial measures are now in place for the term. Are there any questions on this document? So if there's no questions, I guess then I'll look for the board motion to approve the education plan as outlined in 4.7.
Thank you, Charlie. And
I'll stop
again, we did see these documents a couple of times, and we have electronic versions of them, and lots of work went into them. And they profile, or give us our path for the future and a look in the past as well. So anyhow, if there's no other comments or questions, I'll look for a motion to approve the education plan as presented. But again, I guess I'm looking to, should we have a date in there, Charlie? Because that was
So,
2020.
2023.
There would not be a date on this education plan, so the motion would read as is presented because
As
it's the term
presented.
plan. Mhm.
Okay.
I'll make that motion, Madam President.
Okay. Trustee Sirwan moves to approve that the board approve the education plan as presented. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And that is carried unanimously. Okay. Thank you. So 4.8 committee appointments. So Trustee Bannard is on a leave, and we just have a couple of spots that trustees, I'm just wondering if we want to have a quick discussion on replacing her for the time being, her position. So I think there's long range planning is one of them.
As well as Teacher Board Advisory Committee.
Teacher Board Advisory. And the School Council Ad hoc Committee, but I do not believe that we'll actually be looking at that before January 31st. So I don't believe that we need to change that that position. So anyhow, the two positions, long range planning and TBAC. So Trustee F1 has volunteered. Sorry, Trustee Tugwood?
Oh, I was just going to volunteer for the long range planning because I think Henry's volunteering for something else.
Would you like to do Teacher Board Advisory?
Actually, I am Teacher Board Advisory. I'm the alternate. So I think Henry is or whatever. So I'm already the alternate on that one.
Okay, you could take the position though, Sounder's position.
Madam
I
Chair, if I could,
oh.
the Teacher Board Advisory Committee consists of trustees Tugwood, Bannard, and Effon at the current moment.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So it has to be somebody other than trustee Effon or Tugwood.
Oh, okay, so you're not an alternate then?
Actually, I am an alternate on that board. Well, I thought I was.
No, it looks like you're
Maybe
one of
I'm
the
wrong.
three. You're one of the three.
We don't have alternates there. You're not the alternate. So, however, what we can do is, Madam Chair, if I may, like you've stated, I don't anticipate any work with TBAC till maybe January, February. So if we can leave that as is, and then just focus on long range and ACSTA.
Okay, so ACSTA, Henry, you are already the alternate. Yeah. So that takes care of that.
Long range, yeah. So long range. So Donna, you said you want to go on long range for the interim?
Yeah, I'll volunteer for that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess the TBAC, we're not concerned with that
No, we'll
meeting
leave
in the
as
next
is.
while?
Yeah, we'll leave as is. I don't anticipate us having any meeting.
Okay. Charlie, do you anticipate any meeting before the end of January for TBAC?
So Lori, is there any, that would be, Lori's the senior admin rep on TBAC. So I'll turn it over to her.
Yep, so we, Colette Kraus is the lead for TBAC from the ATA side. So she was supposed to get in touch with me in regards to a time frame as to when she would like to meet. So give me a few dates. I have not heard from her yet. I'll send her an email just asking her to send me some dates as we had requested in our last meeting.
Do you anticipate a possible meeting before the end of January?
It's a possibility. I know she wanted to meet quickly, but then I didn't receive any information from her, so it's a possibility. We can delay it till after the end of January. That's not a problem. I don't think there's any pressing items.
Okay, that would be a good option if we could relook at that after January 31st. Okay.
Will do.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're adding Trustee Tugwood to long-range planning for the time being for a term till Trustee Bannard is able to return. So I'll ask Ed, what's the best option to, do we need to reaffirm our committee list?
Yeah, your best option is probably either to confirm the committee list or at least appoint Trustee Tugwood as a alternate for until the return of Trustee Bannard.
Okay.
It's not in your policy that there's an alternate in this committee, but I think the board would have latitude to appoint the alternate given the circumstances.
Okay, is there somebody willing to make that motion that Trustee Tugwood be appointed to long-range planning until the return of Trustee Bannard?
Madam Chair, I will make that motion that we appoint Trustee Tugwood as the alternate appointee on the long-range planning until the return of Mrs. Bannard.
Trustee Bannard.
Trustee Bannard. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so Ed, will we see the motion on the screen?
I'm just typing it now, Madam
Okay,
Chair.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So that everybody sees it before they vote? Yes.
Yeah.
Is that the correct language, Madam Chair? And Trustee Effin?
Yes, this captures it. Thank you very much.
Okay. So I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Trustee Sirois? Okay, and that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're on to
Madam Chair.
5.1.
Sorry,
Yes?
Madam Chair, I guess in error, I forgot to mention one of her roles, and that is the ACST director. I'm just wondering, does that need to have an alternate as well between now and the end of January?
Madam Chair, if I
Yeah,
may.
go ahead, Trustee Effin.
I'm the alternate there, and we've worked on that. Actually, there was a meeting yesterday that they were going to talk about it, and as per their bylaw, right, to bring me in. So we've dealt with that already. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, 5.1, our audit. Trustee Eflon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you are all aware of, we did meet with our new audit committee as per the new Education Act. We met last Tuesday, the 24th, and looked with our auditors to look at our recent audits. In light of everything that we've done, I'll turn it on to Mr. Laka to give us a brief summary so our public can follow and understand what we did.
Thank you, Trustee Eflin. With regards to the audited financial statements, they have been posted as in a draft form to the agenda. What I intend to do is just review some of the highlights from those financial statements and provide some context on a very high level to our results in terms of finances for the division. And if you'll just bear with me while I start a slideshow. And everybody should be able to see title page is for the audited financial statement highlights for the year ending August 31st, 2020. Everybody can see that now? Thank you. That's a little better. So with regards to the audited financial statements, last year was interesting in many, many, many ways. And I think it's, in terms of the context, it's important to point out sort of what occurred last year, in case we've forgotten, because so many things happened and things ran together. And it's hard to believe that we're kind of through and on another side, even as we're entering a new phase of the pandemic responses. So last year, just as a recap, we had the implementation of the Education Act and a review of all the board's policies and admin procedures with regards to that implementation of that legislation. We had a provincial budget and school authority funding announcement in October. Normally we would have that in the spring. We developed a budget in the spring based on assumptions that certain funding would continue. Funding was actually confirmed late in October, 2 months after we had started. So as a division, we had to respond to those changes very, very, very quickly and try and maintain our student supports and direct supports in the classroom that had been set up to that point. Our property insurance renewal at the beginning of September and into October, November of last year. We had insurance increases across the board. But the most significant is property insurance, reflecting much of what we're seeing in the press from other areas of the insurance with regards to property. Our insurance increase for property was over 250%. And again, one of those things that we were adapting to kind of into the start of the fiscal year. The capital maintenance renewal program, which accelerated IMR projects, that was announced in the spring. We looked at what projects we could bring forward and access funding to help mitigate and address some of our deferred maintenance needs within the division. And that accelerated a number of our IMR areas that might have been timed out for years 3 or 4. So that was part of last year. And then, as everybody will be commenting on, I'm sure, is the pandemic. As of March 16th of 2020, we ceased in-person classes. And that resulted in the layoff of staff and reduction in our contractual payments with our transportation contractors. And also, because of those types of savings and reductions in operations, the province recovered funding from that, from our jurisdiction. We also recognize that in terms of fees for transportation or other school services, that would not be rendered after March 16th, that we had to return those fees. So the pandemic had a number of cascading effects in terms of our finances for our jurisdiction. So as a result, some things that are key from our financial statements is that we've got significant savings and from the operational minimizations after the 16th of March. Those totaled about $1.2 million, and that's net of a provincial recovery of over $500,000. But those savings also allowed us to continue to provide benefits for extended healthcare to our support staff who had been laid off, and normally in the course of a year would be responsible for the cost of their own benefits over the summer months. The board extended those benefits at the cost of the board to the start of this current year. Along with those savings, it's important to note, because of our budgeting processes and our allocation of resources to schools, almost half of those savings were retained in the school budgets and were carried forward to this year to address needs or additional costs that they may have coming into this school year, and recognizing that there was a financial benefit for having to go in to cease the in-person instruction that had occurred. Along with that, we also had some other items that provided some savings to the division. In terms of our expenditures, and because we use a lot of estimates with regards to not only our revenues, but our expenditures, when we reviewed our staffing costs overall in terms of what we had budgeted, we had savings of about $600,000 in staffing costs from what we had budgeted. So again, in terms of finances, that all allowed us to finish the year far stronger than we had anticipated. Not only after the spring budget, but more significantly after the fall budget, when we had drawn down a lot of our surplus resources, whether they'd been previously allocated for a purpose or not allocated to a purpose, as well revisited a number of our expenditures to reduce them to minimum in order to support what we anticipated would be a significant reduction in services if we didn't do that, because our funding had changed so significantly. One of the other results is, as I said, we've got a net increase in unrestricted net assets. Previously, we had projected a deficit. Most of that deficit has now been reversed through savings in those lowered expenditures. In terms of our operations with regard to board expenditures, the board expenditures have a cap for last year of 4.55% of our total expenses for the division. At the end of last year, our actual expenditures for system administration and board governance came in at 3.92%. Now, a number of those resources are diverted to support instruction, facilities, or transportation, but the board is keeping a very, very tight fiscal policy with regards to their operations, as well as operations of our central office. In terms of what management was taking back from this, with regards to our savings and staffing, we needed to make adjustments for our average cost for future years. Many of those adjustments have already occurred for this current year. Reductions to the staffing that was done, bear in mind that was mandated by the province. The supplies and services savings, those reductions due to cancellation of in-person learning and activities will be retained at the school level. One of the things reviewing our financial statements that we also identified is that our revenue composition was significantly different in terms of the property tax revenues that we had budgeted for and in comparison to the previous year. The one thing that property tax revenue differential doesn't impact our funding. So the reduction in funding that we received from the province was not in proportion or related to those reductions in property tax revenues, but perhaps does indicate the need for us to for the board and the trustees to talk to our stakeholders and reaffirm their support by directing their taxes to the separate boards, rather than just either ignoring that selection of choice or failing just to realize that they have that ability to direct property taxes still to the separate system and support Catholic education. Again, in the presentation, if there's questions or comments from trustees, I invite them all through rather than waiting to the end. So again, providing context for these financial statements and looking at our comparatives, one of the significant things is that our enrollments traditionally have been increasing, and the chart shows it kind of in reverse, starting with the most current year and going back historically for the last couple of years. The reason that this is important for our context is that previously this meant increased funding to the division, and our spring budget was based on that. What happened is that our funding was leveled when the budget was and our funding was finalized in October, but we still had in place all the expenditures as if our funding was going to remain the same. So again, presenting challenges to us. What I've got here is a comparison of what that spring budget looked like in terms of revenue and expenditures, and what our reality or our financial statements indicate. As you can see from our spring budget, we have a significant reduction in revenues, $2.2 million approximately. 1.6 of that was change in actual funding to the division based on the fall funding announcements from the province. The province had eliminated a grant identified or a grant calculation on class size, redistributing that funds to support the increased population or supporting growth. But for the division, that meant for a net reduction of almost $1.6 million that we had to find from cost savings or utilizing of reserves and excess funds. As a result, our actual expenditures were also short significantly. But we did have to absorb certain things. One, as I mentioned before, additional insurance costs of almost $400,000. We also had allocations specified to address needs of students with significant needs in terms of their educational program. So we had some increases in expenditures that we had to also address. But overall, we managed as a division to keep our budget and our expenditures in line, but I won't negate the fact that the majority of that is due to us entering into a pandemic response, which ceased in-class instruction. And so those COVID expenditure reductions on a financial aspect were positive financially, and it's not to diminish the impact that it had on staff, students, and families on a personal in terms of their education or mental. But on a financial level, which is where I speak from, it gave us a positive. Again, looking at our expenditures compared to our budget for instruction transportation, we kept our proportionate expenditures relatively the same as what we intended in our budget. Of course, we had to reduce. The one area that didn't was O&M. And operations maintenance actually had the lowest COVID savings for an area, as well as their proportionate increase in the insurance costs, especially due to property. So in proportion, facility operations and maintenance was not able to maintain that same proportion as we had to adjust our budget to what our actual revenues were anticipated to be. Instructional revenues, again, are different from the budgeted ones. To address the funding changes, our savings from the COVID response, as well as the additional cost savings that were there. Again, providing some comparative information in terms of what are unrestricted surplus. The board has mandated or looked to have an unrestricted surplus of about 4.11 days. Or about 5 days, where we landed up for this year with just under $1 million of unrestricted surplus, is that equates to 4.11 days compared to our expenditures this year. if I looked, this year was an unusual year in terms of expenditures. So I looked at that $1 million and said, how does it compare to the expenditures of 2019? That 4.11 will actually drop to just under 4 at 3.86. So we're still, as a division, and where the board desires to be in terms of having a comfort level or a reasonable savings account for unanticipated events. We're still under that threshold, even with $1 million. One of the other things that I'm trying to portray through this graph is what is happening to our school-based surpluses. And there's two components to that. One is the budget surplus. So as we allocate resources to schools, they may find deficiencies over the school year and they don't spend everything that they had budgeted for, but we allow them to carry those dollars forward for future years. In some cases, they may underspend very specifically, although cautiously, for things that need replacement. When we're looking at CTS areas, we expect them to have a savings account. So when they're replacing a saw or an expensive piece of CTS equipment, they have the resources to do that. Well, this year, again, when we're looking at the reduction in our services and what happened in the COVID response, our school-based surplus out for their budget has increased significantly. And almost doubling from where it was in 2019. On the flip side, school-generated funds, which had represented almost $600,000 in 2019, has significantly dropped. We had consciously, from administration's perspective, talked to schools about why they had surplus funds. In their school-generated funds. Those are accumulations of either non-instructional sources of revenues, things like canteens, but for the most part, it has to do with fees and fee structures and saying if there's surplus funds, why are the fees either still being charged or do they need to be altered or adjusted, or can those funds be repurposed and used for the students that we now currently have? So there's been a reduction overall. On this chart, the green dot represents the sum total of what is unrestricted surplus. So the division sort of savings account plus the school's budget surpluses. And for 2020, that totaled $1.7 million. The other years, you can see historically where it has landed. That figure is significant because that's the figure that the province points to in terms of resources the board has available to it to address needs and unforeseen circumstances. But that has a context as well. And so the last slide I have for my presentation is with regards to comparatives is how does that accumulated operating surplus compare to other boards that are similarly sized, and that's by the number of students. And again, for 2019, 2018, I've said where we've stood compared to those other boards or our cohort boards. And for 2020, where we had planned to be in our budget, where we actually finished up. What I want to say about this is that in comparison to other boards of similar size, I think our board is significantly below what other boards have in terms of what they have for surplus resources or resources to address. It's not to say that that's a bad thing. I think it means that the board and the division is carrying out the expectation that we are spending our resources on the students that we have now. We are trying to maintain a savings account, whether it's through the schools or through undesignated funds at this point. But it's certainly in comparison, it is not as high as other boards have around the province. So I think the trustees should feel confident that when blanket statements are made about school boards, that we need to be looking at that and saying, are we the exception, and making sure that that is clear for the minister and the government that we may be an exception to their blanket statement on surpluses. So my summary comments about our audited financial statements and our final financial picture is, to put it mildly, last year was a difficult year. But financially, we benefited from the cost savings of the shutdown. We were able to maintain benefits for support staff who were laid off Again, that pastoral perspective that we carry as a school board and a school division. We still are not out of COVID. We're not out of the pandemic response. We still have future effects that will require that the division has reserve funds. We know that also, and I didn't list it in part of our context, that the province changed our funding going forward in the framework of which jurisdictions are funded. And part of that results in, because our enrollments for the current year are less, and it's indicated in a note to the financial statements, that we have a potential adjustment for enrollments being below our projections because of the circumstances that we're in. And that adjustment will impact us in future years. The other thing was with regards to a pandemic response, we have to continually monitor this year in terms of our cost of operating both our online school and both of ensuring that our schools are safe environments through our cleaning and caretaking as part of that pandemic response. So COVID is an ongoing process and that pandemic that I think everybody appreciates. It's just that when we're looking at some things, it may affect us not only for this year, next year. In terms of our enrollment projections, it'd be up to 3 years. The last thing with regards to financial statements that is probably the most important for me and the staff in financial services is that the financial statements have a unqualified audit opinion, which means that they are free of any material misstatements. So there are no errors that will significantly affect the interpretation of those financial statements, as well as they comply with generally accepted accounting principles for public sector entities. So I'm very pleased that we've come through the audit process with that clean audit report for the board. And that is all I have in terms of presentation on behalf of the Finance Committee.
No, it was excellent. Thank you, Ed. And the audit was excellent as well. We had excellent conversation with our auditor, very positive, and he appreciated the cooperation from staff and just the diligence of the work that is being done at by financial services. So thank you for that. And as well, I just want to thank you for highlighting highlighting the through the slideshow. That was excellent. And just touching on the need for advocacy to our stakeholders regarding property taxes. And as well, bringing to our attention, like we definitely are under that 4.55%, under 4%, actually, 3.98 or something, right? So those are important things for trustees to know. And when we are talking to our stakeholders and being able to speak to those things, and we will need to speak to our surplus. So I don't know if you can give us a bit of a breakdown on the surplus, like it's 1.7 million. And so just over 4 days of that is operational.
Yeah, what the 4 days is calculated on is the $993,000 that is in unrestricted net assets. The other $700,000 is in our school-based budgets. So across our division, each of our schools has carried a surplus. Some might be small. Some of our schools were carrying a deficit forward and had attempted to put plans in place to make sure that they recovered. I'm happy to say that all of our schools have recovered their deficits in that regard. So some surpluses might be proportionately smaller for the size of the school. Other ones, because of accumulated surpluses over the years for savings and replacement of furniture and equipment, as well as just the unintended one, not so much on the staffing side, but just not having the expenditures of supplies and services over the course of the 3.5 months that we were shut down, and just buoyed up their budgets significantly. So that's where it's school-based, but the province does look at the total of those two in conjunction to what the division has for resources to address any unforeseen circumstances.
Right. So then overall, it's about just over 300,000 that we potentially could have to use in our budget next year.
And I'm
or maybe not.
I'm a little confused where you're calculating 300,000.
Okay, well, last year we had talked about around 200,000 that was available, that we left as
That's right.
unrestricted, yeah. And that's kind
Now-
of bumped up to just over 300,000.
That
It's
has
what-
actually bumped up to 900,000.
Okay, so
So-
that includes the operational
Yeah.
days. Oh, okay, okay.
Yep.
Just so that I understand it. Okay,
And
okay,
and if I
excellent.
may
Trustee Eflon?
And if I may comment to add some context to it as well, remember we will need ministerial approval if we want to use any of these reserves as well. Okay, and Ed, something that I would like to remind our public as well. This audit ended August 31st, so all COVID impact starting in September when we reopen hasn't been fully assessed. That impact will be coming in our next audit. So that's something that we have to be very mindful of, even though we've received some supports across both federal and provincial government, but the impact of all of these financial impact on the division wouldn't be known fully until we've gone through this in next spring come the summer when we looked at our next audit. Okay, and again, you did touch on that property tax. Again, it's a way connecting us to our ratepayers, and this shows very much what our ratepayers do put in to support our Catholic schools. All right, I believe that's it on my behalf. Ed, thank you so much for all that. Any questions before Ed wraps this up? Okay.
I just have a reminder that we do need a motion from the board. And Trustee Eflon, if I can project that for everybody.
Yes, please.
Can you see that?
Enlarge it a little bit, please. There you go, better. Thank you. So, Madam Chair, if I may, as the chair of the audit committee.
Go ahead.
That the Board of Trustees of St. Thomas Aquinas Roman Catholic Separate School Division received the audited financial statement dated August 31st, 2020 as information and approving the release to the public and to Alberta Education.
Okay, is there any discussion or comments from trustees? All good? Okay, well, again, I'll just say, just to commend staff for the excellent work and keeping things really on track for this past year, but very unusual year and unprecedented, as we've heard from many. Okay, so Henry has made that motion. All those in favor?
Right.
Okay, sorry, Trustee Svidich. Okay, yeah, thank you. I don't have my screen full here. Okay, and that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so I think we're at a good time to break for lunch. So we could recess until, is everybody in favor of coming back at 12:45? Okay, we'll recess until 12:45. Thank you, everybody.
Good lunch.